Portland and free speech go together like voodoo donuts and a cup of hot Stumptown coffee. And nobody is prouder of that than Multnomah County DA Mike Schmidt.
This is a community that likes to protest.
But Portland protests are starting to become synonymous with Molotov cocktails and tear gas. And we've all basically accepted that tomorrow's Proud Boy rally will get out of hand. So I just had to ask.
Is this something that people should be proud of?
Hey, you remember last year we made this big deal about Oregon passing the Student Success Act. Anybody? You remember that, right? No? It was supposed to pump $2 billion into schools over the next 2 years. Well, thanks to COVID, it probably won't be doing any of that. And a viewer asked if we could open up the KGW vault and unearth one of her favorite Portland memories from the 1950s. And we couldn't say no. Here's the story in prime time, baby.
How about those shades? I try to tell them, so we're not ready for prime time. We're just not, yet here we are. I guess it's up to you now. Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Haggerty. This is The Story. So normally we are on at 6 o'clock where I feel safe and comfortable. But, hockey really threw us a curveball tonight. We don't cover a lot of sports on this show. Now, if you are new to The Story, hi, welcome. We do the same kind of local news thing that everybody does, just a little, maybe a lot different. For example, as you can tell, I'm not wearing a tie. Huh? Radical. I know. But we also like to get you involved in the conversation. So if you see something you like, if you see something you don't like, tell us about it. There on your screen, you can see all the ways that you can reach us. You can email us at thestory@kgw.com. We're going to be answering some viewer questions tonight, as you'll see. I also love going back and forth with people on Facebook, so you can find me on there, or use Twitter and just use that hashtag HeyDan to talk with us. We've got people watching those feeds throughout the show. But we got a lot to talk about right now, so let's jump into the big story. So, for folks who caught our show yesterday, we spent a lot of time talking about what could happen tomorrow in Portland. A right-wing group called the Proud Boys have a scheduled rally at Delta Park in North Portland. And where they go, left-wing counter-protesters tend to follow. And historically, that has meant brawls in our streets. We have no reason, honestly, to believe that tomorrow won't follow that same exact pattern. We also talked about yesterday how Oregon State Police and the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office initially said that they weren't going to help Portland police run crowd control tomorrow because they didn't like the fact that Mayor Wheeler banned the use of tear gas. But today, Governor Brown told the Sheriff's Office and OSP, not only are you going to be there, you're going to be in charge of crowd control, and they will be allowed to use tear gas. So here we are again, a night before a rally where we pretty much already know what's going to happen. I think I could probably write tomorrow's newscast tonight. That's how predictable these cycles have become. A question that we love to ask here on The Story is, how did we get here? Now, to help answer that, I talked with a former Portland State University professor, Randy Blazak. He studies hate groups and white supremacy, and I wanted to get his take on why groups like the Proud Boys keep coming back and why violence always seems to follow.
They are provocateurs. They like to spark violence. They know when they come to Portland, wherever they might be, they could be at the zoo, that they will get a well-organized response from the other side, and some of that may be violent. It certainly makes for great memes and videos and images that they will spread about violent Portland and the violent leftists of Portland. And I think it's sort of a media event for them. I think there are also many of those folks who are still looking for revenge for the death of the Patriot Prayer member who was killed in Portland. And I think the larger narrative that this is happening is that there is a large contingent growing in the extreme right-wing movement that wants a civil war in America. They see events like Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing of 1995 as attempts to create civil war, and they have been building ever since that moment, and they are coming to show their strength in Portland this weekend.
Now look, and you know this already, this isn't just an issue of right-wing violence. There has been plenty of violence during left-wing rallies and protests downtown and across Portland. Blazak talked about that as well.
The left has sort of been this rhetoric about defending against the rise of fascism and doing what you need to. And there is much debate within that community about what that means. Some people feel that we are on the very brink of fascism in America, and any means necessary will be used to prevent that from happening. I think the other side, of course, uses some of those images of violence on the left to prove their point, that, you know, Portland has sort of lost control of itself. And so there is a kind of a battle for what the future of America is going to look like happening right here in Portland. But it's a complex conversation happening within movements, including within the Patriot Prayer and the Proud Boy folks on those sides, on how out front can they be about their racism, for example? Do they have to sort of code that? And on the left side, you know, when does violence become counterproductive? Because one of the things those folks will point out is this country was founded by rioters, you know, on a certain level. If you look back at the Tea Party and the Stamp Act and a lot of the important moments of the American Revolution were people who were rioting and destroying property. So they both are making these historical arguments that somehow they're going to control the direction that the country is going to take.
Now, whichever way the country ends up going, Multnomah County DA Mike Schmidt has found himself smack dab in the middle of the struggle. Now, for my primetime peeps who may not normally watch us, I've talked quite a bit to Schmidt over the days. He's a proud progressive and thinks our justice system needs to be reformed. One of his more controversial policies calls for protesters arrested during riots for low-level crimes not to face prosecution. Now, history has shown us over time and time again, that protest can be a good force, a force for good. And the Black Lives Matter protests that we've seen fall in that category, no question. But those peaceful protests have regularly given way to what we saw Wednesday night in downtown Portland, when a rioter was recorded, you see it here, look at this angle, throwing a Molotov cocktail at police. Now, I interviewed DA Schmidt earlier this week. He condemns violence and says that Portland has a proud history of protest. But I wanted to press him on that phrase right there of it being a proud history of protest, and focus on the people at the violent protests who aren't directly taking part in the violence, but don't seem to have a problem with it happening around them.
If the people who decide to stick around and support those who are throwing the Molotov cocktails by simply being there in the face of police officers, is that something that this city should be proud of?
So, I mean, the way you're using the word support is being present. And I think there are a lot of people who are present in these nightly events that would not say that they support throwing Molotov cocktails. I've watched a lot of these at night on live streams, and I've heard the dialogue and things that people are saying. I've heard speakers say, hey, if you're here to do violence, get out of here. We're not about that. So just for being present, I don't think you can say that they support violence or they support throwing Molotov cocktails. I think that's a pretty bold oversimplification.
Well, just for the sake of argument, you know, I remember during the Charlottesville rally when the president took a lot of heat for saying there are good people on both sides, basically insinuating that just because people were there while others were chanting neo-Nazi chants doesn't necessarily mean that they agreed with what those people were saying. Perhaps they were just there to support the statue not being taken down. And I remember thinking to myself, even if I was there to support a statue not being taken down and I started hearing people chanting neo-Nazi white power salutes, I'd start thinking to myself, I think I've found myself at the wrong rally. Okay? And then you would leave. And I'm wondering why that's not being why people involved in these aren't being given that same treatment, and saying, well, night after night, these are ending with fires being set, violence, and almost routinely, at a very high percentage, there are people within the group that are causing real damage and harm to people. Maybe I'm not at the right rally. Maybe I'm actually supporting this violence and not necessarily only supporting what I believe. Just because I'm not being violent, I'm giving credit to the people who are.
Yeah, I don't think I would equate people at a neo-Nazi rally to people who are standing by at night talking about Black Lives Matter. That's a that's a pretty false equivocation.
Yeah, but that's different. I'm not saying that those two are equal. I'm saying that there is a certain level of guilty by association, and I'm not trying to compare the movement of Black Lives Matter to a neo-Nazi movement. I'm talking about, if you are there supporting people who are actively breaking the law on a nightly basis, what responsibility do you take from showing showing support to that activity? Is there any?
Well, I mean, I think if you are out there and you're actively doing things to, we've seen cases where police officers making an arrest, and then other people will come in and try to forcefully unarrest that person. I think that's supporting somebody, and that is engaging in violence. But being present and being a person who is there to talk about, your ideas about the criminal justice system, I don't think that's lending the violence material support.
At 12:30 at night, at 1 o'clock in the morning, in a neighborhood with neighbors yelling for you to please leave, they're trying to sleep, do you think that fits into that category of?
The category of what?
Of someone who's just out there trying to discuss civil rights and Black Lives Matter.
I think that there are people out there that are showing up at night that feel like they haven't been heard for a very long time, and feel like our system hasn't changed in a very long time, and that these things keep happening over and over again. So showing up at night later on, if that's the way that they feel like they might be heard and they're not engaging in violence, that is speech.
We talked for more than 30 minutes, and that was kind of the tone of the interview throughout. It might have been possibly the tensest conversation that the two of us have had. I asked him about his policy that encourages police to arrest, detain, and then release people without charging them. And I asked him why he thinks that tactic has been so widely accepted by the same city leaders who not long ago criticized federal officers for the exact same things. We also talked about a meeting with the police union where he alleges the union president accused him of being Antifa and in the pocket of George Soros, and whether he would prosecute protesters who shout down Portland citizens at their homes, as we've seen in some clips on social media. We're going to be covering all of those in the next couple of days, of course, but if you want to check it out right now, you can see that whole interview. The whole thing is up right now on the KGW YouTube channel. Give it a watch, leave a comment, and hit subscribe while you're there.
When the story continues.
Sammy, all set singing for us? Here he is, Sammy, and call me Lonesome from now on.
We're digging deep into the KGW vault to when Portland's singing cowboy, Heck Harper, was all over our airwaves.
I will abide with thee.
Hey, welcome back to the Not Ready for Primetime newscast. I'm Dan Haggerty. If you saw something that you want to talk about in the first part of the show, don't hold it in, don't pen it up. That's not healthy, okay? Grab your phone, tweet us, use Twitter. That's healthy. Use that hashtag HeyDan also while you're on there, or email us at thestory@kgw.com. All right. So you might remember last year we made this huge deal about Oregon leaders passing the Student Success Act. There was a huge political fight in Salem about this to get this thing passed and get it passed quickly because it was huge. It was supposed to pump $2 billion into schools over the course of 2 years. Notice I said supposed to, because like most things in 2020, COVID-19 ruined it. Here's Kristen Severance.
Good afternoon. Today, Governor Kate Brown signs the Student Success Act.
The Student Success Act was supposed to save education in Oregon, or at least help it a lot. Part of this $2 billion proposal would go towards things like behavioral and mental health supports in schools.
The business tax, which will send $1 billion to schools, is now the law of the land.
A new tax on businesses was supposed to pump $2 billion into schools over 2 years. The biggest pot of money was the $472 million in the K-12 student investment account, going directly to districts to spend on what they thought was most important. Districts all over the state held listening sessions about where they should spend the money.
Sophomore in 7th grade.
Mom of 2 Portland public school students, Camilla Adams, attended one and suggested the money be spent on reading literacy and math interventions.
What was your feeling when you left the session? Like, how were you feeling?
You know, I felt helpful. I felt like, yes, things are finally going to turn around. Things are going to change. Things meaning equitable education.
PPS was set to get $39 million through the Student Success Act.
So the $39 million was going to add counselors to our schools, social workers to our schools, really get to social and emotional learning with our students and supports. We were going to be able to lower class size at K-12 across the board.
PPS and every district across the state had to submit an application to the Oregon Department of Education with their plans. Everything was set. All they needed was the money. Then COVID happened, changing those plans like everything else in 2020. The $2 billion over 2 years was supposed to come from businesses making over $1 million. But as business revenue fell, so did tax revenue. The pot, expected to have $472 million, shrunk to just $150 million. Colt Gill is the director of the Oregon Department of Education.
I just want to acknowledge how the reduction in funding is disappointing given those hopes and dreams that were shared in those meetings, but that we're going to continue to work forward, and we see this as a temporary setback.
That $39 million set to go to PPS fell to just $13 million after 2 rounds of cuts by legislators. PPS said they were able to use $12 million from their own general fund to pay for some of the programs they planned on doing, like hiring counselors and funding community partners who work to support students of color.
And so we're taking those investments and delivering on the vision that they've told us they want.
Parents say it's disappointing COVID changed so many things about educating kids, including the funding package that was supposed to help them.
It's really an interesting time that we're in, and I hope that the districts can support students because I feel like a lot of students now are further behind.
Okay, Kristen Severance joining us now. A question I have is, does PPS or did they have anything planned for the kids that now they have to scrap or can't follow through with because they don't have the money anymore?
So I asked that question to Claire Hertz. She's a deputy superintendent for PPS. You heard from her in the story, and she said, yeah, a whole long list. They couldn't, reduce class sizes like they wanted. They couldn't hire as many counselors as they wanted, although they do have more counselors this year compared to years past. Dan, I've done a lot of education stories. I'm working on several right now. The impact of COVID on our kids' education, I do not think it can be overstated.
Yeah, no matter who we talk to, it doesn't seem like anybody quite knows what to expect next.
Right.
All right, Kristen, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, people who make history have a way of making a lot of it. In the case of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she is still making history, even in death. Today, she became not only the first woman, but also the first Jewish person to lie in state in the United States Capitol. Ginsburg is now the 35th person to ever receive that honor. And after that piece of history became widely reported, we started getting a lot of emails like this one we got from May, who said, I thought Rosa Parks lied in state at the Capitol when she passed. First of all, May, thank you for asking that question. It's a good one. But the honors bestowed on Rosa Parks and the ones to Ruth Bader Ginsburg are a little bit different. Basically, there are 3 ways significant figures are typically honored after their passing. They can lie in state, lie in repose, or lie in honor. Justice Ginsburg today was lying in state, and that refers to specifically to a member of government being displayed inside the U.S. Capitol Rotunda after their death. This has to be approved by Congress. Now, lying in repose is basically the same type of thing. It's just anywhere other than the Capitol Rotunda. So when people honored Justice Ginsburg at the Supreme Court on Wednesday, she was lying in repose instead of lying in state. So state equals Capitol Rotunda, and repose equals anywhere else, which brings us to lying in honor. This is bestowed on private citizens, not members of government. They also lie in the Capitol Rotunda. Only 4 people have ever laid in honor. That's Billy Graham, 2 fallen U.S. Capitol police officers, and you guessed it, Rosa Parks. Hope that clears things up, May, and thanks for the question. Time for one of our favorite segments here on The Story, and that's the KGW Vault. That's where we look into our old archives for clips from past years. A viewer named Christine emailed us tonight's idea. She said, hey, Dan, just a little suggestion for a vault story. When I was a little girl in the Portland of the 50s, every child watched Heck Harper, a live cowboy-themed kiddie show featuring 20 or so local children on set. My campfire group was on more than once. See if you can dig it out. It would be a happy moment for older Native Oregonians and something light for everyone else, for a change. Great suggestion. And we were able to find a clip in the KGW vault paying tribute to Portland's singing cowboy after he passed away in 1998.
Think back a few years. Do you remember this man, Heck Harper? He hosted the Circle 8 Hoedown and a live kids show during the 1950s and 60s that is still dear to the hearts of many native baby boomers.
And a mighty fine bonus gift besides.
Heck Harper was among the first Northwest celebrities of that brand new medium, television, and kids adored him. Here, in silent KGW news film from 1957, Heck Harper entertains kids in Beaverton with his dog Tinker. For 15 years, make-believe Swede Ole Swenson was Harper's trusty sidekick.
Sammy, all set sing for us? Here he is, Sammy, and call me Lonesome from now on.
During Heck Harper's electronic heyday, there was no color, few special effects, nothing to grab you except the man and his music. Heck Harper was age 79, but this is how he sticks in the mind of a generation, singing sepia-toned, Forever Young.
I will abide with thee.
I love the vault. I know a lot of people love the vault, so if you have a suggestion, something you want us to go dig around and look for in there, send us a message. Get the contact info on the screen. You can message me on Facebook. Lots of ways, right? Use Twitter, hashtag HeyDan. Some people are doing that right now. We're going to read a couple comments after the break as we finish the story. We'll see you then. Easy one. Megan wrote in and said, "Hey Dan, do you film this show live or is it pre-recorded?" It's live because I just read your comment on air that you sent a couple of minutes ago. You'll notice a couple of the segments or the interviews and stuff we do, sometimes they're recorded, but we are live. Now, as far as some of the more intense comments we got tonight, I always feel like I've done a good show when I hear it from both sides. Some people were emailing me right off the bat when we had Randy Blazak on talking about white supremacists and coming into this town and how it generates violence, and they were saying that I was being sympathetic to protesters. And then later, when I did my interview with the DA, I was being called a supporter of fascism. Somebody writing me on Twitter saying, watching Dan Haggerty defending fascists on KGW News. First of all, that's just a ridiculous thing to say. I condemn fascism entirely. It's a disgusting practice, and we're seeing what is happening because of the fascists in this country right now, and racism in this country and white supremacists in this country right now. Next time you send out a tweet like that, share the link to my entire interview. You can find that right now on the KGW YouTube channel. That's the story for tonight. Thanks for being with us.